FM News Talk 97.1. On-demand audio.
Said that the gun lobby is the most powerful lobby because if so, she won't be the next president. And that'll be a reason to get on our knees and thank God.
Yeah, Mike Huckabee there talking about Clinton and talking about the gun lobby, and she's not going to pander to them. And at least now they've got their target in the right direction. So hopefully that helps out with Donald Trump. And hopefully between the Supreme Court list last week and the endorsement of the NRA, we start to get more people on board. Interesting, and we'll talk about this coming up here in a few minutes. You see the front page of the Post this morning? The headline is Accentuating the Negative. The Post-Dispatch has to talk about the negative ratings in the latest poll on Clinton and Trump. Almost tied. What they don't talk about till you get well into the article is the fact that Trump's leading her. If you look at an average now of Real Clear Politics, Trump is ahead. And that's something the liberal, they didn't want that to be the headline. They had to talk about the negatives of each candidate. Great. I'll get to your phone calls in just a minute. Charles Cole, hang on the line, 314-969-9797. If you paid any attention last week, you saw that Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg called in some leading conservatives to chat with them about these stories that have been going around about whether or not conservative points of view have been filtered out on Facebook or squashed somehow. That may be the least of our worries. Jennifer Burke is joining us right now. She's the managing editor at Politistic. Jennifer, how are you?
I'm great this morning. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Thank you very much. I'm just looking at your website. I see that you were leading off with the same thing I did this morning, though, before we talk about Facebook, and that's the officer being acquitted up in Baltimore.
Yes, I was very, very glad to hear that. I don't know if you remember, but when the 6 officers were charged in the death of Freddie Gray, not only did Marilyn Mosby, the state's attorney in Baltimore, sound like a radical activist than a state's attorney for Baltimore, but she also severely overcharged them. I mean, people who were in the know, legal experts were like, there's no evidence to support the majority of these charges, and there's no way these officers are going to be found guilty. Well, the first officer was a hung jury. And this particular officer, Officer Nero, opted for a bench trial instead of a jury trial, and he was acquitted of all charges. So, of course, they're preparing for riots. Let's hope the city of Baltimore doesn't, some of those people who chose to rebuild after the $9 million worth of damage are probably worried now what's going to happen. A lot of the business owners, I'll bet, didn't rebuild. I wouldn't have if I were them, trying to serve your community, and then they take out their anger by destroying your business. But we'll see what happens, and then what happens with the other 4.
Yeah, they're holding their. I expect protests today. I wonder, since this was not one of the guys charged with the actual murder, but just assault, I wonder if maybe they'll keep their powder dry, so to speak, until the next trial or the next one after that. But at some point, it's all going to erupt again. I'm just convinced.
Undoubtedly, and let's see if Stephanie Rawlings Blake. She was the mayor of Baltimore who said she gave people space to destroy and denied saying it, even though she was caught on camera saying it. She said she was encouraging people to accept the verdict, whatever it is, and accept the process. But, of course, for a lot of people, justice is whatever they want, not what the evidence warrants, but what they want. And so I already heard people being talked to in interviews saying, somebody needs to pay.
Right.
Regardless of what the evidence says or anything.
Well, welcome to Ferguson. We had that problem right here in the St. Louis area, and there still hasn't been resolved to a great extent. I've still got people who send me nasty tweets and emails because of the Ferguson situation. So,
it's incredible, and that still perpetuate the hands up, don't shoot lie. But that's a whole nother show.
No kidding.
A whole nother story, I'm sure. But,
we could talk about that all day.
Still believe that happened, even though the Justice Department said it didn't.
So on Facebook, I saw that Glenn Beck walked away from that thing heaping praise on Mark Zuckerberg, but there were a lot of people who walked away still a little suspicious of what Zuckerberg had to say to them. But Facebook, as you pointed out on Politistick, may not be our biggest concern, right?
Well, Facebook is a concern for a lot of us. I can tell you, we feel like we have suffered due to, for the past 9 months, we tried to get a hold of someone at Facebook saying what is going on, because we noticed a significant change, not for the better, in our page performance, even as our page grew. And we finally, getting a hold of a human at Facebook is almost impossible. We finally did and are in conversation. But one other area that people really, really need to be concerned about, because really I would compare them to the power of the educational system or even the entertainment industry, is Google. Google for years, I stopped using Google primarily. I mean, I might go to it every now and then, but I stopped using it primarily as my search engine years ago, because the thing that struck me was they couldn't even put a patriotic banner up on the 4th of July.
Right.
You were lucky if you got a little 2-inch stamp of a flag on the 4th of July, and that was just to try to appease people. But they have honored, radicals, people like Che Guevara. They've honored him in the past. And most recently, they honored someone who sees Che Guevara, who was the butcher for the Castros, as a hero. And the person's name is Yuri Kochiyama. This person, who Google honored with a large, what they call a doodle on their page, and what it says behind her, equality, she not only had praise for Castro and Malcolm X and Che Guevara, but she praised Osama bin Laden, saying, "I thank Islam for bin Laden. America's greed, aggressiveness, and self-righteous arrogance must be stopped." So the man responsible for the death of over 3,000 Americans on 9/11/2001, and who knows what other amounts of people throughout the world, is praised by an individual, and Google thinks that it's a good idea to honor this person? What kind of message is that sending?
Well, what kind of filter do they have on Google? I mean, you can see the impact of it even under the Google News feed. But if you just go out and put in a Google search, they have complete control over what it returns and what it doesn't. We don't know what we don't know, right?
Right. You don't. And even when it comes to the subtlety of pictures, I mean, I've encountered this. If you look for a picture, you can take the best looking, staunchly conservative person that is well known in the country,
right,
and search for them on Google, and you'll find, you're like, how did they? This person rarely takes a bad picture. How did they have all these horrible pictures of them, as the top? And then you'll search for someone like John Kerry, and you're like, okay, surely there's a horrible picture of John Kerry. I mean, come on. And you're like, they're at least decent. And we started noticing that a few years ago, that if you're conservatives, or heaven forbid an outspoken Christian conservative, you can be a supermodel and have those used, and Google will have your worst pictures on the front page.
Well, it's an interesting conversation. I would direct people to Politistick. I think you'll enjoy the website if you go there. Politistick, Politistick.com. And Jennifer Burke is the co-founder and the editor-in-chief over there. Jennifer, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a blessed day.
Absolutely. You too. Thank you for joining us today. We certainly appreciate that. Glad to have her on. Interesting, isn't it? It may not be Facebook you need to worry about. You probably Google stuff all the time. Everybody says, I don't know the answer. Google that. And the filters on Google may be worse than anything you've ever seen on Facebook. The difference is at Facebook, somebody came out and admitted it. Google, we have our strong suspicions, as you heard Jennifer say there, because we know what their bent is politically. So you have to wonder. Charles, thanks for hanging on. You're on the air.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Sure.
Just a couple quick things. One is, as I was waiting, I thought of one thing, but if they had one designated person in a school with a gun, that would probably be fine with me. But if you have any of the teachers that want guns, then when the first responders, i.e. the police, showed up, who would they know were the good guys and the bad guys if there's people in plain clothes with pistols?
It's a good thought.
I'm sorry?
I said that's a good thought.
Okay. Now, the other thing I talk about, I'm going to mention is, I do it, you do it, everybody does. They say, the Constitution says this or that. Well, it's really not so, and you don't know what's in these laws for number one. Number two, the Supreme Court actually is a end provider of the definition of that, and these are the same people that said corporations are people and money is speech. So, it could mean, when you say it don't mean that, that's not necessarily so until somebody with the authority reads it and says what it means.
For which one particular?
Well, I'll take that North Carolina law that limits minimum wage rates throughout the state. No, they think it's about bathrooms, and it is about bathrooms. It's also about hindering raising the minimum. And so people are going to say, and like I say, this is no critique of you. Everybody, all the radio shows do is they say what the Constitution says, and you can't possibly know what that law means until you know what the whole law is, and the final judgment is at the Supreme Court level.
Well, that's true, Charles, which is the point I've made here repeatedly, is that it's the Supreme Court stupid. I hate to keep going back to that, but this election hinges on the Supreme Court. The next president will pick 2, maybe 3 justices, 1 immediately. And because they do, the liberals interpret it as a living document instead of interpreting what our founders wrote, that's where the danger comes in, because they legislate from the bench. And that's what we've got to prevent. 314-969-9797. Cole, Jack, I'll get to your phone calls when we come back right after this break. Stick around.